In 1953, at the University of Chicago, Stanley Miller attempted to reproduce Earth's early atmosphere. He pumped hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and a small amount of water vapor into a maze of glassware. Then he sparked the gases with an electrical charge to simulate lightning. After 5 days, he got what he wanted. A few simple amino acids had formed in the dark residue at the bottom of the glass. Now, this was hailed as a eureka moment for atheists. They believed that if you could show how life could form on its own, then there would be no need for God. People all over the world did, and still do, believe that this experiment proves that life can be created with nothing more than lightning, water, and gas. There's a lot wrong with this. In the 1960s, scientists discovered that the Earth's early atmosphere was not hydrogen, methane, and ammonia, but carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water. Now, with these gases, Stanley Miller's experiment won't work. He himself tried it and could not produce even a single amino acid. But let's say it did. Even if his experiments were valid, you're still light years away from creating life. Here's how I know. It doesn't matter how many molecules you can produce, you're still nowhere near creating a living cell. If I take a sterile test tube and I put in a little fluid, with just the right amount of salts at just the right balance of acidity and alkalinity at just the right temperature, perfect for life, and then I put a living cell in, and then I puncture that cell and let all the little stuff leak out. Now you have all the things you need for life, not just the pieces of the molecules, but the molecules themselves. Still, you cannot produce a living cell. You cannot put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So, what makes you think a few amino acids dissolved in the ocean are going to create life? It's completely unrealistic. In Darwin's book on the origin of species, there's only one illustration, and it's called the Tree of Life. Darwin used it to explain how every species of animal and plant that has ever existed on planet Earth had evolved from the same common ancestor through small, gradual steps over enormous periods of time. Even though Darwin's Tree of Life is included in virtually every biology textbook over the last half century, contrary to what we've been told, there is no conclusive evidence for a common origin of all life. Perhaps the most damaging blow to Darwin's theory is the fossil record itself. If all living things descended from the same common ancestor, then the rock strata of the Earth's crust should be filled with creatures which were once part of a great evolutionary chain of small biological modifications, leading from the origin of species to the diversity of life we see today. Yet after 2 centuries of research, it's not there. The most dramatic example of this is an era known as the Cambrian explosion, where the body plans for virtually every major animal phyla appeared not gradually, but all at once. And this happened in the sea. In a geological instance, the animal kingdom leaped from small, relatively simple organisms to extraordinary creatures with compound eyes, spinal cords, articulated limbs, and the record of this explosion looks nothing like Darwin's slowly branching tree. In fact, Darwin's tree exists in the fossil record only when we impose it with our own minds. That's not to say diversity doesn't exist within each phyla, and adaptation does certainly occur over time. But it's not a tree stretching back to a common ancestor. I cannot believe that purely naturalistic processes could account for the origin and diversity of life. It's just not true. In The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin wrote, "If it could be demonstrated how any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." Throughout the second half of the 21st century, spectacular technologies have revolutionized our understanding of the cell. These new discoveries have shattered the foundations of Darwin's original theories, and in the 19th century, when Darwin was alive, scientists believed that the basic unit of life, the cell, was some simple form of protoplasm, like a little piece of jello or something. They didn't even know what DNA was. But with the hard work of science in the 21st century, we have seen that the cell is far from simple. It contains very complicated molecular machines which are very resistant to Darwinian explanation. Each cell contains about 3 billion units of DNA. Now, if you go inside the cell, you will find something like an automobile factory, where the DNA constructs the molecular machines that drive the cell. Now, just one cell is tremendously complicated, but humans, like me and you, contain trillions of cells, all working together. Each of these biochemical machines is a masterpiece of engineering and nanotechnology. They are essential to functions as vital and diverse as vision, photosynthesis, production of energy in the cell. But let's focus on something called irreducible complexity. Imagine something like a rat trap. It didn't grow, it was made. And if it's missing some of its pieces, it will not work. That's irreducible complexity, and it's the product of intelligent design. This is a bacterial flagellum. Now, if it looks like a piece of machinery, that's because it is. It has two gears, forward and reverse. It's water cooled, it runs on acid, it has a stator, a rotor, a U joint, a drive shaft, a propeller, and it runs at nearly 100,000 RPMs, and it can stop in a quarter of a turn. Howard Berg at Harvard is labeled the most efficient machine in the universe. This thing was engineered, was built. It has about 40 different parts that make up the primary motor. Half are constructor proteins, specialized mechanisms which assemble the primary components. Not only was it was made to make more. Breast straps can't do that. Cars can't do that. Only life can do that. And only God can make life. The existence of complex biological machines raises an obvious question. If natural selection wasn't the agent of their construction, then what was? The centerpiece of my presentation is the most efficient information processing system in the universe, the DNA molecule and its language of life. The discovery of the information bearing properties of DNA is a fundamental challenge to all materialistic theories into the origin of life. Darwinism will not be able to survive the biology of the information age. DNA is a carrier of genetic information in the form of a four-character chemical code. That is to say, DNA functions a lot like a software program, only one more complex than anyone has ever created or devised. Geneticists estimate that the amount of biological information necessary to build every protein of every animal that has ever existed on planet Earth could fit into 1 teaspoon, and then you would still have enough room left over for all the information in every book ever written. The more I learned about DNA, the more I understood the significance of the most fundamental question facing biology today. Where did the information in DNA come from? Based on our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning about the past, there is only one known cause for the origin of information, and that cause is intelligence. Whether you're looking at hieroglyphic inscriptions, or text in a book, or code in a computer program, if you trace it back to its source, you will invariably come to intelligence. Therefore, when you come across information inscribed along the backbone of the DNA molecule in a cell, the most rational conclusion based upon our repeated experience is intelligent design. The implications of the scientific evidence, coupled with logic, are profound. If we're finding information in every cell of every living creature, is that not the signature of a creator? I used to have a hard time believing in God, but this was because I did not understand him. For some people, God is discoverable everywhere. For some, nowhere. If the strong and weak nuclear forces weren't configured just as they are, the bonds that create water would be impossible. The fusion which creates our sun wouldn't exist. If the ratios between the sun, the moon, and the earth weren't exactly as they are, we would never get a solar eclipse, which is rare, by the way. We would not have been able to test Einstein's theory of relativity, and we would know a lot less about the nature of reality than we do today. And our position inside the spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy, not too much gas, not too many stars, gives us a perfect view of the night sky for observation and research. Everything exists within the mind of God, the entire universe, and all the laws of nature. Math, art, religion, science were all meant to be studied together as part of a united whole, because they reveal a universe perfectly ordered by the power of number, because they measure the depths of the sea and the forces of fire and the magnitude of physical things. It leads to a reverent awe at the skill and wisdom of our Creator. All things are thoughts, which the Creator thinks.